A MAX Air flight carrying more than 450 Nigerian passengers, mostly students from Romania, has landed at the private jet terminal of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in the nation's capital, Abuja. The passengers are said to be among those who fled into Romania from the Ukraine in the face of the Russian invasion. Now, to provide us more details on this, we're being joined by our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, who is at the international airport in Abuja. Good morning, Kayla. It's been a long night for you.
Yes, it has. Good morning, Ladi. Yes, we were expecting this flight to reach Nigeria at about 3:30 a.m. So, pressmen, all of us, we were at the airport at about 2 a.m., hoping that by 3:30 this flight would come in. But that didn't happen until about 7 a.m. When we saw over 400 of the returnees coming in from this MAX Air flight at the private jet terminal of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport.
Now, they are on ground there. They are going through formalities. Those who watched the earlier program, Sunrise, will know that you already provided that information. Could you give us more detail about what it is that they are expected to go through now that they are on ground? What do you know about that?
Well, it's a lot of documentation. We were told that a lot of them had to escape from Ukraine. So many of them didn't have passports, so special certificates were provided for a lot of them. So before they'll be allowed to go back home, which will be very soon, really, because the process is really fast, they're going to be filling an NITF and ECIF form. Basically, a lot of documentation about where they're coming from, where they're heading to, just to make sure that we have proper documentation of the Nigerians who have returned so far. They're also taking tests, PCR tests, COVID PCR tests were ongoing at the airport as well. And then, of course, they've been advised to self-isolate until the results of those tests come out. For those who are negative, they can go on with their lives, but they're self-isolating, which means that they'll be isolating at home. For those whose tests come out positive, the report is that the FCT administration, the FCT health team, will be giving them free treatment for those whose COVID tests come out positive. So those are some of the documentation that's going on right now, and to ensure that we have proper records of who's in and where they're going to following this particular crisis.
Have you been able to speak to any of the returnees themselves?
Yes, we have. We spoke to quite a number of the returnees.
And what are they telling you about their experience? I mean, they're coming back to Nigeria from Romania, but I mean, many of them, in fact, all of them, were domiciled in Ukraine. So what did they tell you about their journey?
So, we tried to get a feel of how they handled the crisis when it started. A lot of them talked about how they were very scared. The sirens were constantly blaring. There were so many advisories as to, people should leave this area, leave that area. So for a few of the Nigerian students that we spoke to, they had to find some form of transportation to any border that was nearest to them. For these particular returnees, they were able to make their way to a border in Romania, and they got there. They weren't the only ones. We also have Ukrainians also fleeing the conflict. Arabs and, people from all over the world were at these borders, So the process to get there was really difficult. Someone told me he had to trek for hours. They were on their feet for 3 hours trying to get to that particular border. So quite a harrowing experience for a lot of these Nigerian students who have not experienced war, So it's very traumatizing. You can see it in their faces that they're actually really traumatized by the situation. By the time they got to the border, a lot of them talked about the challenges that they had at the border. When they got there, one particular young lady told me she felt really bad when she got to the border and she saw the transportation for the Indian students and there was none for the Nigerians. She said initially it was really poor in the beginning. But when I told them to rate the Nigerian government's response afterwards, they said most of them gave it a 7 because they were talking about how by the time they were able to get into Romania, that the Nigerian embassy in Romania did a fantastic job housing them, making sure that they were okay. Said they were actually pretty shocked at how well the Nigerian embassy in Romania had treated them. They were very happy about that treatment, and they said that probably helped to reduce a lot of the stress that they had gone through. And right now they're back in the country. They're really thankful. They actually took their time to be calling out the names of some Nigerian officials from the embassy in Romania and from the foreign ministry in Nigeria here, who have been very helpful to them throughout this process. So very vocal young people, but also very tired. But it was interesting to hear a lot of the experiences that they shared. But definitely, some of them are worried about going back to school. For instance, one of the foreign officials, foreign ministry officials, was speaking to us earlier, and he was talking about how the students who are in their final year, medical students in their final year, were not returned. They have to finish school before they can come back. They're trying to find some kind of way to make sure that they're safe throughout the period that they finish their education. But for the ones who have come back, he was talking about how arrangements are going to be made between the Nigerian government and the schools in Ukraine that the Nigerian students go to as to how they can continue the education online. And he was specific, saying we do not want that gap in their education. So those are some of the things that they're trying to work through right now.
I heard you say during your conversation with Malware on Sunrise just before this program started that even though there were huge words of praise for the embassy officials in Romania, it wasn't quite the same situation with the embassy in Kiev itself, and that many of the students had to find their way by themselves all the way to the borders, to the various borders. Did I get your reading correctly?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, one of the lawmakers, Mr. Adodogua, who came back with the students, was talking about how more funding has to go to our foreign missions. And when I heard him talk about that, I asked him what challenges he felt. He was talking about, the foreign missions have to be able to prepare for emergencies such as these ones. It's not only about people coming in and out of the country. Know that there has to be actual plans and budgets in place for situations like wars, for emergency situations. And when we took that from him, we decided to find out from the students, what their experiences were in the different embassies. And we did hear a few of the students talk about the embassy in Kiev, talking about how more needs to be done, how, at the time when they needed the help that they needed with the emergency, they didn't get that kind of help from the embassy in Kiev. We have a few students saying that to us, but they did have a lot of high praise for the embassy in Romania. So it's something that the conversation has started right now, and I think a lot is going to be done to look into foreign missions and to see how they can be better prepared for emergencies.
Did you hear anything about what happens to the students after today, after they have been processed, as you have told us, through all the documentation they've done, the self-isolation, the results are out, and they're free. Is there any talk about looking after them or trying to ensure that those of them who have to probably go back or have any reason to have things brought back from there for them and so on? Is there any plan post today, post the arrival from the evacuation?
Well, nothing was said about that particular situation. What was said was that a lot of these people escaped. I think the focus of the Nigerian government, based on the communications that we got from them at the airport, is that they want to return as many Nigerians who want to come back. They want to be able to bring them back into the country first of all, before they start to look at, their properties and if they're going to go back and whatever other exigencies they might be. But the main focus really is to bring them back home, and that's where they are working on. A few more flights are going to be coming in. When it comes to some sort of assistance for the returnees, all we did hear the Ministry of Foreign Affairs state today is that they're going to give them some money. They're going to give them, I think, $100, he mentioned, for them to be able to travel, for those who don't stay in Abuja, so they can travel to their various destinations. And I actually remember the official from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stating that the least a ticket can be in Nigeria is about 50,000. So that basically helps you to start to get to your destination. So they're going to be given some money to get to their destination for those who do not stay in Abuja. But as for their properties or whatever it is that they've left in Ukraine, no word on that yet. The focus right now, according to the government officials, is bringing them back. And then things like their education, will be looked into, and that will be something that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be looking into with the schools that these students go to. And I think it's part of the documentation that they're filling today. What school do you go to? How do we contact the school and things like that? So that's where we're at on that matter.
Let me thank you very much, Kayla Megwa, for your reporting this morning and the long night that you've had. We'll, of course, stay in touch with you throughout the day for updates on this story as well as your report. But for the time being, thank you.
Thank you so much.